go. Okay. Back again. Another Industry Chats. Hello, Twitch. Hello, Xalavier. How are you doing, my dude?
I I did some crunchy stuff last night and this morning, so I passed out for a few hours, and I'm now in this magical golden period where you could tell me anything happened during the PS5 reveal, and I'd kind of believe you
Okay.
because I don't know what actually happened.
Gotcha.
So I'm kind of cludging together what I'm piecing together what happened during that reveal from the shouting of people in my personal messages, the shouting of things on Twitter, the memes. Um, I'm in this very strange middle space where the PS5 is both everything and nothing right now.
Right. So, like, if I told you there was a game that took place on an island full of sentient foodstuffs and you had to, like, hunt them down and eat them, but then when you ate them, like, your body parts turned into those snacks, would you believe me?
Because I have seen the Bug Snacks reveal, yes.
Yes. I don't. It's like it's probably like in terms of the hype train. It's like definitely no like there's big games going on, but like in terms of like absolute absurdity, like nothing beats the Young Horses team and what they're showing off
I've
there.
I've known what was I've known of the existence of Bug Snacks for a while. So to just see it just be there now, just be public, like people know about Bug Snacks. I haven't seen anything at Bug Snacks. All I've known is known of its presence, known of the dev team. So like, first of all, seeing them have that stage, I'm so happy for them. But also, it's just kind of wild now seeing other people have to live with this same game description that I've just had to have embedded in my head for years. It's like it's bugs that are snacks, and you eat the snacks to catch bugs, but you transform into the bugs as you eat the snacks.
Yeah.
Other people have to live with that now. I'm free. I have this burden that's relieved from me.
Well, that's you are what you eat. It's a great distillation or expansion of that core like idea. But wackiness aside, Zed's losing his mind over Bug Snacks. We were watching the stream together actually.
Hmm.
Wackiness aside, I guess let's do a bit of an introduction. For
Mm-hmm.
those who don't know you, you are a narrative director on a number of games. You are a very busy dude. You're all over the place, including writing on one of my favorite games of was it last year? Hypnospace Outlaw. I love this game. Um, I,
Yes, it feels like it's been much longer than a year, but it did come out last year. Gosh.
yeah,
Remember when events were a thing?
I do. We managed to go to the last PAX this year,
Mm.
and it was weird. I mean, like people didn't really. It was beautiful. It was actually, in hindsight, it was a beautiful moment because nobody knew what was happening. Like,
Everybody midway through on basically the next to last day realized that this would all be our collective last PAX. So it took on this apocalyptic vibe that honestly just tip top choice stuff. It actually reminds me a lot of your narrative work in that you've got this urgent situation
okay,
suddenly presented to a lot of different people, and the way they react to it reveals a lot about their circumstances and who they are. There are people who, like, I know there were just a couple of Xbox reps there. They were mainly going to be at GDC, but they also just came to PAX, and they got swarmed by
yeah,
human beings because this would be the last time to meet Xbox in person or Microsoft. There are some people who were like instantly pulling together lunch groups because they're like, this is the last time I will see my friends in who knows how long. And yeah, getting that range of responses was a really strange and lucid event that in hindsight doesn't feel like it actually happened either.
no, yeah, and it was a weird show. Like as an indie, there,
Mm.
like I was very grateful for the extra foot traffic that happened because like Sony had pulled out pretty early. But on the other end of things, like, you know, I mean, a lot of the audience might not know, part of the reason you go to shows is to make connections, is to shake hands, is to have conversations about your plans and you know, wheel and deal with the appropriate people as much as you can. And like all of the relevant individuals were not present, or like when you could have a conversation with anybody, the only thing anybody was talking about was how crazy things are going and what was going to be. So it was really like a very bad show for business, but at the same time, I think we had a really good time meeting with like the players who came to the show. But yeah, that was a wild trip, but none of that particularly bearing on the writing, right? So okay, one of the interesting things I find about you as an individual is one of the interesting things I find about myself. We both came from you know, we both came from the world of games journalists. You know, writing. You were a freelancer. Like I've seen articles from you from PC Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, and some like other places. So were you just like freelancing everywhere? Because that was kind of my shtick.
Yeah, I freelanced everywhere, and I was really thankful to get one gig in particular. I was PC Gamer Magazine's single columnist for the print magazine for 2 years.
Okay.
Because I started getting into game development and into journalism at basically the same time after trying for a long time to get into both. And I pitched them a column called "Making Games is Effing Hard." I said the actual word. And I was like, hey, I just started making like this Twine stuff, and I've started to work on other people's games. And it turns out every little thing is a horrible, complex mess. What if there was a column that talked about the basic elements we take for granted, cameras, dialogue systems, and so on, and about how that's actually really hard? They said yes. And every month I had a reason to not just get paid, which as a freelancer, not a guarantee.
Never.
I not only had an excuse to get paid, but also to talk to a wide range of developers on and off the record and learn about these basics of game development. I ascribe a lot of my pragmatic view of game development to those experiences, because unless you have been just drowned in the collective memories and experiences and failings, unseen failings of the game industry, right? Things which developers couldn't say in public because for legal reasons or for reputation reasons, and how that affects their lives. It's very easy to have an idealistic dream of, you know, making the next hit game, or of what the industry is quote unquote really like. It turns out nothing makes sense anytime forever. And I got to have that hammered into me over 2 years, and I'm deeply thankful for the people that made that possible, and for all the people who shared their knowledge to make that column possible. When I stopped writing that column, it was because I was doing full-time game dev. I didn't really have time to sustain both, and the game dev was paying better,
right?
Because, you know, journalism rates. But I still, at the end, it hurt because there were still so many topics left to take on. Because game development, every time you look at even a single discipline, there's more and more rabbit holes to go down.
So this is a topic that's like come up on the show a couple times, where there's this like big gap between how people perceive game creation and the reality of it. You know, like very often, like you'll look through the Steam forums of any game, and people are like, "Oh, do this," or it should have had this or that, and it's very much the reality of making a game is far outside of the comprehension of the average, especially mainstream player. I find a big difference in between the indie audience and the mainstream audience, but especially in the mainstream audience, there's just a big divide between like the understanding of what goes into making something possible, and how lucky we are to have games at all. And I'm curious, like, what were some of the biggest misconceptions that sort of revealed themselves while you were writing the column?
I think, to be honest, in as many ways as the column just introduced me to the simple concept of making games being a deeply hard and desperate mess, the primary learnings I got from, as far as the realities of game development, didn't really, the specificity didn't come until I was making things myself. Because, yeah, I had to learn the graphics rendering pipeline to try to fit stuff about cameras and camera overlays into 700 words, along with some flashy pictures and so on for this
That's not a
column.
lot. That's not a lot of text. Anybody who's ever written an article, that's really small.
So like they'd be like, yeah, write 1,000, then we'd cut it down to 700 even further. So until very recently, I didn't know what deferred rendering was and the practical difference that it makes. Deferred rendering, for those who aren't familiar with it, is one of the fundamental pieces of graphics technology. Deferred and forward rendering are sort of the two primary approaches. They are the fundamental building blocks of how a lot of your games, especially your 3D games, are put into the screen. I've been a narrative director for years, but until I was making an airport for aliens currently run by dogs and having to grapple with the personal reality of a graphics pipeline, and oh Lord, all the lights look really nice, but when we look in a certain direction of this airport, our frame rate crashes to 10 from 200. That's a problem. This basic fundamental reality of game development, I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what a physics time step is and how fundamental that is to game development. Can I tell you about colliders, Justin? Because colliders are still blowing my freaking mind.
Yeah.
So, if you have walked across a surface in a video game, what you're likely doing is dealing with colliders. Colliders are the invisible green boxes that define game realities. They define what surfaces you can walk on. If you pick up something and throw it, what is the shape of that collider? That defines if it rolls, if it stops, how it flips. Games are fundamentally made of tiny invisible green boxes that someone has to place by hand.
But why don't we just use mesh colliders perfectly to the 3D models and just cover it completely?
So, you smile because you know that this is the way that madness lies, because the mesh colliders are not actually an accurate. There's even an option you can click on them called convex, which is supposed to create a inclusive model of it rather than an exclusive one that fits the exact model of a bottle or something. It is not adequate, and it takes so much system performance. So if you even think about how this affects VR games, you think you're picking up a bottle, throwing a bottle. What's actually happening is you're picking up a series of invisible green boxes with probably bits of logic attached to them, further complicating this entire mess of things. And someone has to determine the behavior when you pick it up, when you throw it, how it leaves your hand, its gravity, its mass. Everything is little green boxes. And until you are the person having to place those little green boxes, I was in the lead role. I'm in the lead role on multiple games, but until I had to place the little green boxes, I didn't realize they existed. And if I don't know that, how can we expect, players to know or care that this is even a thing? I've discussed this a lot recently, but I compare this a lot to the film industry. If I say the word CGI, it is possible for you to have a variety of responses to that thing. You can be like, CGI, it's when computers put images on the screen. Or you can be like, there's green screen CGI and there's blue screen CGI. Or you can be like, oh, there's computer generated environments and computer generated characters. There's this tower of understanding that you can ascend, but you can at a base level know computers put graphics on the screen.
Right.
We don't have for video games, it seems to be much more all or nothing, even if you are working on the games. You don't know what animation is doing and what a blend shape is. I barely know, and I'm gonna have to confront that at some point if I ever want to have animation in a game, because I've tried to avoid that studiously if I'm the person making the game. And in all of these respects, the fact that we can't have a basic level of knowledge of how the sausage is made, that it even is a sausage. Imagine if you didn't even know what a sausage is. You just eat sausages, but you don't know that it's a casing, and inside of the casing there is meat. You don't know anything about that. How can you expect people to have a real empathy for the process and difficulties of it if they don't even know that the quantum sausage exists?
Right. It's also I think part of it is that there's an essentialness to keeping that illusion, right? Because I mean, if we're going to talk specifically about the Collider world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have, I mean, all of these 3D models in the game. You have all of these, 2D images, like placing, stagger. Everything is built out, but that world fundamentally means nothing. It is a ghost. You can walk through it. There is no weight to anything, but it is this invisible world that's layered on top of all of those art assets that defines the actual experience. And it's amazing that games trick us so well into feeling their weight and feeling their reality, even though the thing we're feeling is always the invisible world, not the seen world. There's very little that we see that actually is anything according to the game. And that fundamentally blew my mind when I started working in 3D. But I'd wager that one, I mean, it's really kind of boring when you actually start like going into the details of like how to make this stuff work, and it's really hard to figure out. So there's that barrier. But I think there is this barrier of illusion. We want to keep the illusion. Like, I mean, we're here talking about it now and everything, but it's something that makes our games enjoyable. And once I think that illusion is shattered and you can see the Matrix code for what it is, Neo doesn't have a lot of fun anymore, right?
There is a. So I would say that there is a massive cool factor to learning this, because it is genuinely fascinating, lovely stuff. The difficulty I do think is the illusion, because for so long games have profited from making that illusion very opaque. When Sega in the 90s tells you we've got blast processing, they do not want you to ask what blast processing is. Do not look for the man behind the curtain. But what that's created is an environment where we are so separated from the people who play and make our games that we don't have the capacity to meaningfully communicate why things are the way they are. The illusion is now upheld so stringently that any crack in it now creates a whiplash effect, and we have to overcome that if we want to meaningfully move the medium forward, because you can't move that medium forward if there is still such a fundamental knowledge divide between the people who make games and the people who play games. Like a few years ago, Horizon Zero Dawn revealed that they had something called frustum culling. Whatever is behind you does not physically exist, because we have to, show a giant open world on the PS4.
We can't afford to render everything. We can only render what's in the fan around in front, right ahead of you.
Yeah, and that blew a lot of people's minds, even though it's a basic fundamental technology. But also, it made a lot of people mad, because they're saying, "Where's the rest of the game, huh?" It's like, well, it is behind you. They're like, "Why isn't it there?" Because then the game wouldn't exist. It would melt your PS4.
Right.
And we have to keep. I fear that we are at a point where we have to keep intentionally risking those whiplash points just so we can get over this now basic wall that's been constructed, because it is a wall that's been built for us, and it is a wall we can take down together, but we have to get over it in the first place.
Right. So is maintaining this illusion further fostering that sense of entitlement and like that I mean I'll make no qualms about it. There is a sense of entitlement in the games in the game space. People feel entitled a lot more than I see in a lot of other industries, and very demanding. Um, is this illusion that makes the games enjoyable also responsible for that?
I believe on a fundamental level it is, because as long as you simply see something as magic, you're going to ask the magicians to do anything and everything. Have you
Okay.
had someone ask why your games aren't multiplayer yet?
Oh, thankfully mine have avoided that. People realize that no, my games would be pretty bad multiplayer. But I've known developers who have, and I've worked on, actually that's not true. I've worked on little, like, I've helped people on projects where people are like, it'd be really great if we had a multiplayer, and it's a physics intensive virtual reality experience that like you cannot in real time send that many points of physics data and
And,
synchronize
and
them.
that's a, and that's the thing, right? You say physics intensive, VR, like all of these terms, what they even mean on a base level, what the consequences they have on development. Um, if we don't have that foundation, then it makes all the sense in the world that someone would say, why don't you just add multiplayer? Because for one person, it could be relatively easy. For another person, it would be the worst mistake you can make
Right.
in making a video game. And the line between that is defined by your budget and by 1,000 infinitesimal things that if people don't even know the first of them, we're we're never going to get over that gap.
But it would be better with multiplayer.
Sometimes, yeah, but it's also sometimes impossible.
Right.
Uh, people, uh, people have been when people ask for console ports,
Mm.
I
Oh, that's one I'm
used,
familiar with.
I used to think that was a fairly simplistic thing, especially as we get more game engines like Unity and Unreal Engine. For a little bit of transparency, to even if you've been approved by the console, Unreal needs to approve you and give you ability to access console code directly. You have another entire layer of bureaucracy and progress to go through before you can even figure out whether you can run on a console. And
Right.
without that fundamental knowledge, uh, then yeah, it is somewhat akin to a Looney Tunes cartoon where someone steps on a rake and it hits them in the face, and then they stumble towards their goal and they get hit by another rake in the face, and it turns out that it's a field of rakes because these, for both legal and practicality reasons, the basic things that mean you can't have the shiny thing now, at least in the way that you would like it, um, are hidden from view. All you know is that games can exist on a console, so why not this one?
Yeah.
It might be that the way that your controls are set up, you literally cannot have rebindable keys. It would take months of full-time work to put that back into the game. But that work is invisible because other games have it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a problem. I think that's one of the big divides between the business and programming world and the world we are more familiar with, the writing world. Writing world is actually kind of wonderful, I find, because I mean, there are definitely constraints when you're working in a project with its own boundaries and everything, and also like trying to satisfy the gameplay demands and everything. But when it comes to writing, it is far more adaptable, malleable. You can add, you can change with greater ease, and I'm curious. That's part of the appeal for me. But like, what is it about writing that makes you stay in that camp so heavily?
Games writing and narrative is important to me. The reason why I moved into narrative direction is because I very intentionally, early in my career, realized that I needed to discover the exact pieces that would keep me in this industry for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. What do I actually care about in terms of making games? Because I'm sure you've seen journalism world, development world, people get stuck into a role and they're just kind of a journalist for the next 15 years until they get fed up with it, and then
Right.
they can't really do anything else.
Right. They get shuffled over to PR world.
They get shuffled over to PR world. Maybe they try to go into games writing, but this thing of like what will keep them happy, what keeps you creative, isn't explored. And so I did that very intentionally. And what I figured out is I don't particularly have to have my hands on every piece of a game or in every piece of game's narrative or even writing to feel good about where I am on a project. What I care about is bringing a thing into being. I care about collaborating with a team and enabling a team to reach a creative vision. And at its core, especially the way game narrative can be treated at times, if you're a narrative lead, especially, you are a problem solver.
Right.
You learn that if giant piece of the game is going to get cut, your job is then to figure out how does this story function without the second and third act? How does it feel complete? That's a problem to solve. That's a problem you can, especially if you're enabled to, solve in a stylish way and such that no one ever realizes that a gap was there in the first place. You learn, hey, actually, we can't like have multi-stage quests. We can only have one-off quests. And suddenly you have to find a way to structure the game such that all of your quests and quest stages are parceled out among individual NPCs. There's a horde of problems to solve, and you're in the hot seat really for helping a team solve them. And honestly, I love that. I'm not precious about my work. I don't need to be the best writer of all time. I just need to be the writer that makes sure that this game releases. And when you have that perspective, there's a whole lot of anxiety that gets relieved.
That's interesting because I don't really have a lot of that experience where I'm writing content for other people. So it is an admirable trait. But I'm gonna drop an itch link in the chat right now. It's for a game called The Writer Will Do Something. It's an. Are you're familiar? Okay, you know this game. It perfectly encapsulates what I imagine that experience is like. Because writing is the most malleable part of a game. It is perfectly. You're right. It is the bridge at the end of production.
And I know a lot of writers who are deeply upset with that for good reason. Your good work is constantly being put into danger, or you are basically the equivalent of a you're the equivalent of a extremely put upon maintenance person. Like your job is just to fix cracks in a dam all day, perhaps even to the detriment of the thing that you yourself want to build. I get all of that, but as far as my own personal perspective and work, it is most unhealthy in unhealthy creative environments. If the creative environment is healthy and you get to problem solve, or you're at least trusted to just do your job, then, man, there are way worse places to be in games. I enjoy it a lot.
Is that the headspace from where this tweet you posted out 4 hours ago came from? Who has two thumbs and maintained the world and narrative of an original complex IP with real world intersections for over 2 years under indie constraints? It was me. That's the reality of the experience, eh?
Yeah, so I will say my experience with Heart-Shaped Games on We Are the Caretakers, which is an Afrofuturist squad management RPG, which is what I was referring to in that tweet.
Yeah.
Healthy creative environment. I have been trusted and given a lot of autonomy for my job. I have endless love for that team, and how do I put this? It's an Afrofuturist game with the real world intersection. We're talking about poaching. We're talking about realities that a lot of Western people and perspectives are completely divorced from. This is a game I had to go to Nepal to do research for,
Wow.
talking to actual rangers who do the work. I was not often put into a position of justifying a bunch of BS like what you see in The Right Will Do Something.
You're right.
Although I do relish justifying something, some BS. The principal thing is a game can change a lot over 2 years, and when you're dealing with something that has so many moving pieces, so many real world intersections, so much potential to be something incredible, it can and will change. I can say publicly that we've gone through iterations that have thrown into the entire plot, characters, and world into drastically different lights several times across my time on the game. And most of those times, I was also the person who initiated that change, because I do so relish having the ability to say, okay, the entire game gets better if narrative is a tentpole to support it. So so the game has changed yet again, or our development situation has changed yet again. How do we solve the fundamental problems that have emerged as a result of that? And next thing you know, you've got the current version of the game that people are going to be playing for the beta. I'm deeply proud of it. And I probably would have been proud of the version that we put out a year ago. But the reality is that a year passed. We needed a new version. And I was the person who had the privilege and the challenge of making that new version a reality. I got to work with a great team to make it. Again, what more can you ask for than the ability to solve interesting problems?
Right. So, I mean, a lot of the times when people talk to me about my games, they like, so did you like pre-plan and chart out everything that was going to be before you wrote Word 1? And I think what we're gathering from your experience is how ridiculous of a concept that must be, because to fully plan out something that is in such a shape-shifting state is a recipe for disaster.
I would actually say not really. I think a big part of the reason why games are in such a volatile production state is because our pre-production processes, we don't have them. I
wrote a game design doc once. That's pre-production, isn't it?
What we call pre-production is what most mediums would call a pitch. You have together a prototype, you have a proof of concept, and then they say, oh yeah, go make that thing. We haven't nailed what the thing is, how it's structured, what it's accomplishing, how it's accomplishing it. Our pre-production processes, at the very least, are not solving the actual problems that pre-production should be solving. And that results in games where you do have 5-6 years of development time in which the game is getting entirely rebuilt. So what would we didn't work out stuff ahead of time?
Right. What would you add to the pre-production process then? Because I'm in that stage now. Teach me what to do so I don't screw up.
So my particular specialty is structure. I don't know if there's a term for it, but I call it structural game design, right?
Okay.
The most fundamental, we can talk about mechanics until the cows come home, or about narrative beats and everything else. But the thing that most affects a player is the fundamental structure of the game. How do you get from point A to point B? Is it missions? Is it quests? Where is it placed? Is it vignettes? Do you teleport from place to place? Do you have to navigate real world space to get to the next point? Is it a recursive structure where, like, actually you're starting at the end of the story and you move back towards the beginning? All these fundamental pieces of structure are both the places where games tend to get most lost in the weeds. You see this happen a lot with simulation games, where what they're simulating and how they're simulating it changes Bioshock Infinite is a perfect example. It was supposed to be a deeply simulated world in the sky. Uh, from what we have heard and know, there was basically 3 to 4 different versions of it that were in various levels of completion, and they had to rip it all apart and start again. The outside of tech, outside of narrative, outside of mechanics, the thing that is most rock solid that you can identify and lock about a game ahead of time is its structure. So if you nail down its structure, then no matter how the rest of the game changes, you have got one giant tentpole that just remains. So for an airport for aliens currently run by dogs, it is launching in holiday of this year, which is for an open world comedy adventure game, physics heavy, dog stock photo dog weirdness. That's unheard of. That would be around 1.5 years of total development time. But from the very beginning of that project, I didn't even start making it until I knew what the structure was. And I said, the structure of this game is you are in an airport. At airports, you can take quests that will potentially culminate in you going to other airports. The airports are simulated. When you successfully manage to catch a flight, you will have a short narrative vignette on the plane where you talk to your fellow dog, and then you're going to be in another airport again. The core loop is airport, conversation with the dog passenger, airport. And as much as we've layered on mechanics and other beats and specific narrative contextualization for that, at the end of the day, this is a game where you are in a simulated universe of airports, catching flights and solving the problems of stock photo dogs. That structure is rock solid, and so we don't need to, whatever we need to revise, relatively simple, because the game itself and how it exists and how players engage with it is going to be the same. So for other people in the pre-production process, you want to nail down the fundamental questions of your world as soon as possible. And a lot of that can be solved with structure. I've done that months from a game's being finished. I'll be called in as a sort of parachute guy. They'll be like, we don't know. We have to get this game shipped. Our narrative is busted, dude. I come in, and the first things I establish are, what are the structures of this game? What is the base level way in which people relate to these worlds? And when we lock those down, a whole bunch of other pieces fall into place.
So, but like when I think about it at a fundamental level, it's very hard to tell if a structure is good or fun, right? If we have like the structure concept of level, cutscene, level, cutscene, boss fight, that doesn't sound good or bad to me.
Mm-hmm. Which is why you then have to drill down into the structures that build up that structure and so on and so forth. And this is where planning can be massive. The main problem that we want to avoid in games is, hey, we're going to make a game about pain.
Okay.
And then you spend 5 years figuring out what that means. That's I've worked on projects like that. That's tough. And that is a reality to get to the final version of that. But what has been striking me more and more as I'm in a direction level role is how many of those 5 years would have been shaved off if we had spent 1 or even 2 years figuring out exactly what that meant ahead of time. In general, yeah, for production processes in music, they don't walk into the booth and say, what the F is a chord?
Right.
Like, no, we've got fundamental building blocks that make music what it is. For film, we have screenplays. We have all of these pre-production processes. In games, we're still figuring out what that means for us. And the sooner we do so, the more likely we are to make games better, faster, and cheaper. So on my own end, making sure I'm not talking out of my ass, I've done a whole lot of work to like I just I just shipped a game called Mr. Bucket Told Me to. It is an entire survival game with psychological horror and trauma elements that we made in 7 days. The reason we can make it in 7 days is because I spent 3 days beforehand figuring out exactly what that looks like, exactly what our asset needs would be, and exactly what we'd be building before we built it. And we discovered things along the way of building it, ways we can make it better, worse, polish, but the fundamental core of that thing never changed. So we built it in 7 days, and we released it, and a whole bunch of people played it and liked it. And that's where I am right now. I want to be able to measure twice and cut once, and I feel like the conventional wisdom in games is that you can't do that, and I want to call BS on that, if only to learn whether or not that isn't possible.
Interesting. I feel like a lot of people make the jump to assuming that, like a lot of, especially in the indie space, you know, it's based around fail quickly, right? Kind of idea. Jump in, have your game jam, you know, go hard, you know, figure it out, play, and because games, I mean, most games are specifically related to how they feel, right? You're not going to get a sense of that until you start. Like I'll play devil's advocate on this console. I'm like 80% agreeing with you, but I think there's this you know, necessity to like get to the part where people can play and adjust. You know, and this is something,
and that's where planning becomes the downfall, right? Because people plan out a game, and then they get to the point where it's in their hands, and they're like, "Oh crap, this isn't fun." I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in game dev stories, or how many times I've encountered that myself. I'm like, "Oh, it actually isn't the. If it's not an enjoyable part of the game, it's not. If it's not the enjoyable part of the game, it's not the. If it's an enjoyable part of the game, it is not the enjoyable part of the game, right? Can't build the entire thing around this. We are the place in games where it can take years before you first have hands-on, first have the ability to iterate, and that is a problem because games are eventually going to be played. So getting them into a point where they can be played for feel is, I think, a huge part of our of what is currently lacking from our pre-production processes, right? So you can nail down the shape of the thing, and you can nail down the getting it played and being able to move from a core, the easier of a time you'll have on executing on whatever that thing is supposed to be. But especially if you're making something ambitious or mini tendrilled, yeah, that can take years to get to that point, and we have to cut down that time, because if it takes you years to get to that point, you can learn year 3 the game you're making does not work, and you have to ask yourself, what now?
So, but then I think about Super Mario 64, and they had a lengthy pre-production phase, right? But it had nothing to do with structure. It was, let's spend 2 years of Mario in a white room, making sure that jumping is fun on its own, and then they moved on to structure.
Especially for a 3D platformer, that is the structure. Everything in Super Mario 64 still, so much of that game still holds up, because it is, at its core, it isn't a game about the levels or about the paintings. Like on a fundamental level, its structure is going into paintings. But going into paintings, grab the stars, come back out. That's a structure. That probably was locked at some point early on. But at the base level, that world does not exist unless we have locked down how far does he jump? Does it feel good for him to jump? So for pre-production processes, what I'm talking about as far as the structure is anything that is related to the fundamentals of how does the game work. If our pre-production processes are 2 years to make Mario jump good, and then we spend 1 year making all the levels where he jumps good, that is a exponentially better game. And I think that we can see it and we can feel it, because every one of those 2-3 years is apparent as soon as you get your hands on the controller, because they worked They figured it out ahead of time. And if you're working in now genres that are codified, what I think is one of the most powerful pieces of game development is we've got so many solved problems in games,
Yep.
or at least we know how basically certain things work. So if you're making a 3D platformer today, the 3D platformers being made today, I'm sure that the people who made Mario 64 wish they could have built it to the fidelity and to the quality level and with the nuance that our modern 3D platformers have. But they were inventing something entirely new. In a lot of genres, in a lot of games, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think that's also a big piece of, why we have games that take 5 years, because reinventing the wheel is hard, because it turns out wheels are good.
Yeah. There is that allure, though. everybody wants to be like, no, guy, I got sphere wheels now. They're amazing. You can go in every direction.
So this actually happened for an airport for aliens currently run by dogs, and it's one piece that I regret. Do you mind if I talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
So we built a character controller. For those who are not familiar with what a character controller is, the character controller defines everything of how you basically interact with the space, how you click on things, when you can click on things, how you jump, how you move, what's the physical models that make movement possible within a 3D world or even a 2D world, all rely on the character controller, which is where we do all of that work. In the this is very ghoulish lighting. Let me turn that. So, for an airport for aliens controlled by dogs, we had a character controller. It was functional. We did an iteration on the character controller months later, spent a few weeks doing that. It felt better. The problem is that it was still bad. It was fundamentally a bad character controller. For a game about navigating large 3D spaces, which is what airports are, we've still got a little bit of iteration to do, but we're only now locking down our character controller. That is a massive mistake, because that means for the entirety of game development, we haven't known how far the player can jump, if they can jump,
right.
if we can rebind keys, all of these basic, how will it work with the controller? All of these fundamental things about how the game works in one respect was not worked out. We ended up buying a character controller, doing some significant changes to it, and now we've got something that feels good, and that is good, and that we can likely ship with. But it shouldn't have taken us a year to get there, especially when so much of the rest of the game was worked out ahead of time. And that's the place where my head is right now, because I'm in this sort of feverish place where I'm like, man, if we can just work out what a game is and how it functions, work out its problems ahead of time, we can solve those problems and just make the rest of the game. That does mean that making a masterpiece is probably less within the cards, because making a masterpiece requires usually a lot of iteration over time. But the thing in my head says, hey, I don't need to make a masterpiece if I'm making a game in a year and a half and 2 years, because by law of averages, one of those games is going to be a masterpiece. We don't know which one of our games is going to be a masterpiece, but I'm more likely to have a masterpiece in the first place if I make 40 games in my career instead of 5. And I want to be able to put as many cool things into the world as possible with as many cool people. So there's going to be problems with likely many of my games, sometimes fundamental problems. But as long as the games themselves are good, eventually I'm going to hit something really good. And I get to keep discovering, every game I release, I get the opportunity to discover the version of myself that makes the best game I ever make.
Joseph Develop says, people wanting to make masterpieces equals people who never ship. and then Jake tags on, do you have any advice on how to make a game in less than 6 years?
First of all, no shade on people who take 6 years to make games. Making
thank
games
you.
is hard.
So nice.
Oh shoot! It took you 6 years to make.
Yeah, bruh. I spent 6 years on the latest one.
From everything I see, y'all are doing some dang incredible stuff in there.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time that you took to make that game.
Yeah.
First of all, making games is hard. Second, sometimes you just end up sometimes you're making a 6-year game. If you can know that you're making a 6-year game ahead of time, you can stop making that 6-year game or make it shorter, but you gotta know. And sometimes you don't know, and you're just on year 4 and you gotta hit year 6.
Yeah, that's kind of where what happened with us. It was not intended to be a 6-year game. It just ended up being a 6-year game.
What was the point at which you realized it would be a 6-year game?
After we showed it to the press, and they were expecting so we did this big press tour, right? And we showed Sometimes Always Monsters to. This was probably, I'd say, 2016. I think we were 2 years away from launch of ASM. We did this big press tour. We revealed the game to everybody, and they immediately could only correlate it to the first game. Their assumption was, like, my goal with this project was that I was trying to make an antithesis, right? First game's about the hard struggle climbing the ladder. The second game is about the free fall down the slide, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was something wrong we did. I don't know if it, like, not enough time had passed for people to, like, distance themselves from the first game. It was a lot of little issues that just made people only think of the game in context related to the other one. I mean, maybe the titles were really bad. I mean, that's possibly an issue with it. But it was at that point that I was like, no. We got to take a long time. We've got to, like, really figure out, like, what it is that's going to make this experience feel very unique and different from the first game, and also to give the audience the time and space to, like, let that game sink into the back of their mind and hopefully be ready for something new. What ended up happening is that we spent so long on it that people were like, oh man, I can't wait to play that game again. And they like, it just, they were expecting this, like, wave of nostalgia, and we bring them something completely different. And they're like, here, it's fundamentally, like, you know, core is still the same, walking around, you know, the character controller of the game, or whatever you want to call it, is the same, but thematically, it's a 180, and people, I think, were just, like, still not ready for it no matter what. But that's the peril of sequels on its own.
That's a really rough place to be. Gosh.
Yeah.
It seems like, especially as much as you said that's a bad idea, that's so creatively compelling to be able to make the antithesis to your own work. I think one of the few people to do that, also misunderstood in this regard, was Martin Scorsese, because you've got this is a pet peeve of mine.
Okay.
Taxi Driver. Everybody wants to talk about Taxi Driver. Everybody's like, "Oh, Taxi Driver is so good." Taxi Driver is, I'm not going to say it isn't a good film. It is a good film. But they made the same film a year or two later, exponentially more nuanced, and people didn't get it. And that movie is called The King of Comedy.
Right, which I was just about to say. I found it way more interesting than Taxi Driver. I'll be dead honest, I find Taxi Driver a little boring. I find...
Yes! Justin, you get me. Because for Taxi Driver, you've got this story that's being played out, right? They do it, they tell it well. Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, the people involved with that project get famous. And suddenly, they have a different perspective on life, as well as the people around them. And they go, okay, we're going to make that movie again, but we're going to make it about celebrity culture. Robert De Niro counter-stalks one of his stalkers to the point that the stalker filed a restraining order on him because he wanted to figure out what makes someone stalk another person. He was just trying to ask him a question. They were like, no, dude, it was cool when you didn't want me when you didn't want to talk to me. Stop. In a few years later, they put out an exponentially more nuanced film because they'd made the previous film. But everybody just kind of went, oh man, Taxi Driver was cool. And then Scorsese was like, screw it. And they made 45 other movies.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. I think it's part of the growing pains, right? Like, it's hard not to like it's hard not to feel defined by the project you're in, right? I mean, maybe you've got some nuance on this because you've done so many, it sounds like you do multiple projects at the same time. That's something I've never really messed with, right? Like I've done some like game jam stuff and this kind of thing here and there, but nothing I've been like, this is the thing. This when I get in my game, I'm like, this is the thing and this is what I am until it's done. And I hope I feel beyond that now, but at the same time, it's just like, man, it eats you. But I totally agree with you. King of Comedy is a better movie. It's entertaining. It's funny. It's like hard cringe at sometimes. It's like
it's got a depth which Taxi Driver simply doesn't have. Let's get real. These people, when you make a thing and you release it into the world, you get to discover the next version of yourself because you're no longer stuck in that project anymore, right? As you mentioned, right? When you're in the project, that is the version of you until you release that project. Then you get to discover the next version.
Yeah.
Taxi Driver, good film. King of Comedy is a genuinely great piece of work. And they could not have made it if they hadn't made Taxi Driver. And if they had not moved past King of Comedy, they couldn't have made all of the great movies that they respectively made after that. They made their antithesis, and they got to see what happens when you make antithesis. It is, and even do it within a short period of time, and that's it can either go really well or not.
Right. I mean, it should be pretty self-evident. You shouldn't try for a successful project. You shouldn't try and make the opposite of success. I mean, that's just a recipe for making disaster, right?
But sometimes it pulls out some because nothing makes sense ever.
No surprises, and we're not making games to make success. We're making games because this is the art that needs to be told, and that's where I came from with the sequel. I hate this. I hate calling it the sequel because it is not. It's the antithesis.
The anti-sequel.
Yeah, but it's such a pinkies in the air kind of.
Listen, if you coin anti-sequel, I will be so grateful because that means I can just use that term.
You can just use it. Yeah. And Joseph brings the antiqual. And he says you got to make the game that you want so you can make the game that you... Oh, wait. You got to make the game they want so you can make the game you want. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's true. Like, okay, here's the thing. Like, ASM, a lot of that is my assumption of how the world worked, right? I was much younger when I made it, right? And, like, although a lot of it is based on real-world experiences, like, so much of that is... the way I assumed the world worked and like believed in things, and then the new game is much more based in like how the world actually works as I've gotten older and like and seen more of the the realities of the outcomes and the depth behind things. But
I can't wait for Monsters Sometimes Always, where you realize where the way the world works yet and again.
Right, that one you just play me at a desk. No, I'm never going back to that.
And then you turn into a werewolf, and then you just tear apart an open city. It's got beautiful pixel graphics. I'd play it.
It'd probably be a lot more fun than either of the games.
Justin Werewolf Connie.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
Werewolf Honey.
Don't worry, and it's I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. I mean, I do know what I'm doing next. Actually, that's totally a lie. But I don't know. I don't know how good it's gonna be. I don't know what it's going. I'm at this like starting a new phase. We've got time to drop some hype. Next week we've got the Sam Jam happening, where all of you who are interested can sign up. And hold on, I'm gonna drop a link real quick. Sam Jam up. Vagabonddog.com. Okay, there you go. If you sign up, you can join us on a game jam next weekend. You will all be getting, if you don't have already, a copy of RPG Maker VX Ace provided to us from Dejika and Ketakawa, the guys who publish RPG Maker. And we're going to give you a bunch of our Sometimes Always Monsters assets and a base project from which you can start to create your own fun, Sometimes Always Monsters-esque narrative. Or it doesn't have to be narrative. You do whatever you want with it. I don't care. I just want to see a bunch of cool stuff using the stuff we made. So you sign up and have some fun. Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to do a nice long game dev stream. It's not a contest, Joseph. There are no winners here. Trust. It's just going to be a lot of fun, and we'll throw a base project with some of our scripting examples and our most common things. It's if you've never made a game before, sign up. There's an opportunity to try it out, and if you need a partner, we can put you with a partner. If you've only got certain skills, we can pair you up with people who've got other skills, and play matchmaker. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. And that starts on June 19th through the 21st.
I always wondered why we've never gone that route as a medium, because the strength of games is that you can take the same assets, same code, same visual style, and make something potentially entirely different from the same foundation.
I have this hidden project. I won't drop the link to it, but I have this project I've been working on called Apple Baskets. I am chronicling every apple basket I find in a video game, because I think it's the perfect. You may not realize how many baskets of apples have been 3D modeled in games. It's astounding. And the beauty of it is each apple basket tells you something unique about the project. Like,
something unique about the project priorities.
Yeah. Is each apple fully rendered and it has a collider and physics attached to it? Is it a flat texture of a photo of apples? Right? Is it got a bump map on it? Is it each apple's there but they're just static? These are the interesting things. And every time I take a photo of one of these or a screenshot of one of these things, it just reveals to me the inanity of us making all these fucking apples all the time.
I like to call this the fork problem. Yes, you do have unique visual needs and things on each project. On occasion, especially if it's going to be an interactable object, you likely want to make a new fork. But there's so many games in which you just see a fork in one cutscene. Once it's just there. Someone had to spend however many hours 3D modeling a fork and doing the texture mapping and now putting on the material types as we do physically based rendering. We should not be making no new forks in 2021. No. Let's be good to ourselves for once. Never. No one should. Everyone should just use the same fork. If we are going to interact with the fork, just use the same fork.
Come on. But that happens in movies, right? They have the same newspaper in 50 different movies. You can see the exact same newspaper, the exact same magazines are all over the place. And you know who's actually winning is the big multinational corporations of video games. Ubisoft has a library of rocks. They have their drawer full of forks already. They have they keep all of their assets and they reuse them game to game. It's all of us smaller devs who are in our own, because of the way capital. I don't want to turn this into a political situation, but the capitalist mindset in terms of game assets means that we are all on our own and we have to make our own forks.
There's also the cultural pressure, right? If you use the same fork across two games, there is a significant amount of game audiences that would say lazy devs. But it's like, no, I spent 2 seconds getting this fork from the Unity asset store so I could spend 2 years making the rest of this game.
Right. But
and I think that's a mindset we haven't effectively communicated yet, because we're still in a place where we're building cups and plates and forks over and over again for different projects 1,000 times.
But it's like, but at the same time, like yes, the Unity asset store does exist, but one, project budgets, right? That you can blow a lot of money buying assets.
You can.
And it depends entirely on your visual aesthetic. You know, like
That's the second thing. So many indies want to jump, like, from Bugsnax is a great example. I'm pretty sure in Bugsnax they couldn't or don't use any of the assets from Octodad because it's just a wildly different design aesthetic.
Right. And I know we're a little more immune to the progress of visual fidelity than the mainstream is, but the hyper realistic fork is the only fork that can be reused, but also it's also the one that gets outdated. Like there's like obviously people have wanted to like reuse their assets forever, but it's a frustrating thing. Like the RPG Maker community has kind of got this on lock, right? Like, you want a zombie? There's a zombie out there for free right now, no question, no problem. And it fits the traditional RPG Maker aesthetic. It's when you want to do something stupid like we did and like redefine the entirety of the aesthetic to some new, look that you suddenly have to deal with the reality of making your own assets for everything. But no, I'm completely with you. I think we should be reusing more things. I think we're wasting years and decades of man hours remodeling forks and apples and cups and spoons and bowls.
I hope privately after this you do share with me the Apple Baskets project, because it is something I find deeply intellectually compelling.
I want to make it beautiful. It's got to be beautiful. I need to work on because like it's one of those things where I'm hunting myself for all of the individual screenshots. I need to get I should open it up to the community so we can solve this problem
together. Yes.
Together.
But yeah, I would say so with all of that said, the way to not make the 6-year project is to identify you're making a 6-year project and then to not make it. The other thing is figure out what you're building, how you're building it, and why you're building it as soon as possible, so that you can just make the rest of the game. For some games, that will be defining how Mario jumps in a void. For other games, that's figuring out structural tent poles. For yet other games, it is building out this is how visual novels, right? They build out their library of assets, and then they use that in the 1,000 ways that they're going to use those assets. The major thing that also comes with being able to not make a game that doesn't take 6 years is create. How do I make this not sound bad? I think creatives should settle more.
I agree.
I have this term I've been throwing around a lot called creative apathy, and it's this idea of separation from work. You for whether you're the person making the project or you're just working on the project, doing the best you can to the point into which you will put into it. So, like, let's say if you just say, I'm going to make this game in 2 years. Whatever I make in 2 years, that's what's going to be made.
Yep.
You will make a 2-year game. There's going to be pieces of it you're unsatisfied with, but as creators, we're pretty much perpetually doomed to never be satisfied with our work. Better to confront that and bring more things into the world than allow it to consume us.
Yeah, I'm a little more in that state than I was, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. you get, it's very easy to get wrapped up in this auteurism, to believe that, you should have a full vision that needs to be perfectly executed in order to feel happy. And
well, when you made, I have never made a game that took 6 years, which is something that there's a part of me that misses not getting that, at least in some respect. Having made the 6-year game, even having tried to make the perfectly executed vision of the thing, was it in fact perfect?
no, God,
Because
no.
I have a feeling that it was that's an impossible.
Yeah.
The perfect realization of a vision isn't actually possible.
Yeah, no, it isn't. It's not. You still have to, make sacrifices and compromises all along the way. That's just six years of compromises and sacrifices instead of 2. You definitely get more of your ideas into the project, but not necessarily. You'll never get all of them, right? You'll get just as many, compromises and sacrifices along the way. That's the reality of it. Yeah. So I guess if you've got some advice to our jammers, because this is going to be a lot of their first time doing a game jam, what can you say to them? What can you tell them to put them on the path to success of making a game in 3 days?
If you're going to make a game in 3 days, spend at least 1 day figuring out what you're making. Because if you can figure it out and if you can stick to it, the time you will have to add all the polished details, all the fun things, all the nuance, you're going to be able to have it. You're going to be able to have it instead of trying to, an hour before the jam ends, figure that out after like an hour from the jam ending. You're gonna have all these ideas of beautiful touches you can use to bring the game to life, and you will have time to do it if you figure out what you're making first.
Right. I think that's reasonable advice, especially considering you've got a core set of things that you can work with. It's like a found objects project. So hopefully they heed your wisdom. And spend
By the
some
way,
real
it's so
time
cool that you're doing that in the first place. Like, this is a really, I've never heard of a game jam structure this way, but it makes so much sense. Like, I'm so glad you're doing that.
Oh,
that's really cool.
It's actually it was actually Jake's idea. Jake came up with the idea, and I was like, yeah, Jake deserves all compliments for it. I'm really excited for it. I'm curious to see what the people are gonna make. I've been doing development streams on the weekends. People have been watching. Hopefully they've learned a little thing or two, and we're here to help if they need a little more help. So
may I ask a question?
Okay,
just an idea.
Okay,
can you randomly nominate one jammer to have up to 6 years to finish their entry? They bear the mantle.
They wear the 6-year mantle. Somebody pointed me to an itch project called the 10-year the Decade Game Jam. It's got 9 years left on it, and it's like, oh man, like no matter what, you're still gonna realize the suffering at the end of that kind of thing.
Shoot! Make a game that takes 10 years to. The themes in themselves are terrifying.
Yeah.
Make a 10-part game series. Make a game that takes 10 years to play. Make a game that you would consider feature length. At the end of Decade Jam, look back at your growth. Make the game of your childhood dreams. Make a game and update it throughout Decade Jam.
Yeah.
That's.
So yeah, adjective exactly. A never-ending series of updating. Exactly, forever. It ends after a decade.
Oh, this is my anxiety.
It's a bad joke.
There's so many entries in here too. Oh.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know. But
there's one that has in brackets no updates anymore.
They finished early. Yeah, I don't. It's I'm looking forward to the game jam. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think I'm going to make a project. I've got a little bit of pent up something I got to get out in terms of storyline. But I think I'm going to follow your advice. I'm going to spend a fair amount of my first day, maybe all of it, planning and building structure for it, because I think that is actually one of the things. Like, I've got scenes, I've got characters, I've got the big cool story beats, but I actually don't have the structure laid down yet, and I think that's something that I really got to focus on. And I really appreciate you coming on, dropping the knowledge, and helping us out. Is there?
It has been more than a blast chatting to you, man.
Yeah,
I've wanted to. We didn't get the chance to at PAX East, so I'm glad we finally got this. And I do have to say again how much I respect that you took 6 years to make Sometimes Always Monsters, because you don't get a game with 500,000 words without time. And so much of my career has been motivated by this pressure, internal or external, of I gotta make things. I gotta release things. If I'm not releasing a thing, I'm dead. I am dead if I'm not announcing a thing tomorrow. It takes a whole lot of fortitude to not just make the 6-year game, but also decide to, at various points, continue making it. So, no, I'm not trying to flatter you or anything, but I massively appreciate what it says about your character that you could pull that off, because it means taking your demons and forcing them to be in a box for 6 years.
Right. Well, I mean, if there's one thing to pass back on that, it's that we're all a lot less closer to death than we think. Like, I'm hesitant to tell you to relax any, because I love your output. like that. Don't please stay anxious forever. But realize that it's okay to breathe. That's part of the process too. Don't hang yourself on the necessity of just constantly having to work. Like, give your projects, if they need it, give your projects the time that they deserve. That said, I will probably never make another 6-year game in my life.
I want to see what your team can make in a year and a half. I think that y'all would make something that hits really damn hard.
Yeah, we did. It's called Always Sometimes Monsters. Yeah.
Well, there you go. You already did it.
We've done that. You want to throw any light on any of your links? I know you got like 50 projects going right now, but highlight a few for the people.
Just released something. I just released Mustard Bucket Told Me To as part of the Dread X collection. Its structure is that every day you lose one of the basic tools of your survival because of basically it's like Castaway. If Wilson wanted you to die a slow and painful death, he forces you to throw the tools of your survival into a giant bonfire, and then you find yourself scrabbling to, as these tools of survival are robbed from you, survive. I'm real proud of how that was designed, how that came out, although there are ways we could have. I still think of ways that we could improve it. I'm real proud of what we pulled off, and that is the entire collection of games, including people from like Airdorf of Faith and like the guy who made Dusk. That's $7 on Steam. It's real good. The particular thing I would call out is an Airport for Aliens currently run by dogs. We're planning a release. In holiday of 2020, and you travel a simulated universe of airports, meeting stock photo dogs, and solving their problems. It is the game that made me love making games again. And if you look at it for 10 seconds, you will quickly realize why. And you can follow my work at WRIT Nelson on Twitter.
It's on the screen. I highly recommend it. There's a lot of things to go through here. Cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the chat. No dev stream this weekend. Instead, Jane and I are going to be up north, and we are going to cut my hair and beard live on stream. This is a thing that I do when I start a new project, and we are officially in new project territory. So all this goes away, and you can watch that live on.
Are you going to preserve? This is a weird question. Are you going to preserve it in some way? Like this was
Am I gonna put it? I may build a shrine. It'll be gone in the wind. That's what the point is, right? We'll burn it on the fire.
I'm just imagining a version where you just kind of you shave it off as a whole piece, you dip it into a resin, and that is this, and then you hang that on your wall as on the plaque underneath it. It says sometimes always monsters.
Right. Yeah.
Next to it was the always sometimes monsters beard. Next to that is whatever you make next.
Right, exactly. And then I just keep all the stinky old hair around forever.
It's
and
it
just gets grayer and grayer and grayer and grayer. But anyway, that's what we're doing this weekend. So no dev stream. Don't forget to sign up for the Sam Jam, and check us in the Discord for more fun. We do lots of stuff. I don't know what I'm doing next week in terms of stuff, but we got the Sam Jam coming, so that's good. That's gonna be plenty good for y'all. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.